This kind of page spread has no business being in a comic. I just finished White Sand, which is Brandon Sanderson's only graphic novel in the Cosmere, and I'm going to do a spoiler-free review for my experience with this book. Honestly, and sadly, I had trouble with this. This took way longer than I thought it would to actually complete, and I ended up being a bit disappointed in it. So not only am I going to tell you my star ranking, but I also really want to explain clearly why this misses the mark for a graphic novel and why it's really clear this story was always meant to be a novel, not a graphic novel. This is the omnibus edition of the graphic novels. There actually were 3 that came out, and you can see that split up into 3 sections within this omnibus. But they did publish this, and I did happen to get my hands on it for not too terribly expensive. For a while there, it was like you could only find it on eBay or whatever for like $200, which was a little ridiculous. But I did eventually get this, I think for around $40, which worked really well for me, and I'm so glad I did not spend any more than that, because that would have been awful. But let me go ahead and show you some of the reasons why this graphic novel misses. I will say I will open this up to certain pages, but I'm not going to explain the context, and I don't want you to read the words if you haven't read White Sand. I really want you to look at the art and see why I'm saying some of the issues that are happening with this graphic novel. First things first, page spreads like this do not belong in a graphic novel. This is the example of telling and not showing. Graphic novels are literally supposed to be the representation of showing because they're, graphic. They're supposed to have like images and stuff, that's how you're supposed to read the story. This is like a glossary, like hodgepodge, just observing, like not even reading. Do you see how this just looks like a wall of text? Yes, we have these little images or whatever to try to break it up, but there are so many words on this page spread for something that's supposed to be a graphic novel. And ultimately, these page spreads aren't really that necessary to understanding the content of the book and really just are a representation of information that would have come out in a much smoother way in a novel that they're just trying to kind of force into a graphic novel. So this is one of the big issues, and it's not the only page that's like this. Between each of the changes, like each of the chapter changes, we end up with one of these like massive word text blobs. So we have a chapter change, massive text blob. Numerous throughout this book. Absolutely do not belong in a graphic novel. That was my first like big, ooh, not the right pick to go with. See, another example of just like what's basically going to come across as a massive amount of text. Yes, there's some art, but really this just feels like you're reading an encyclopedia, and it's just kind of like your eyes just, I don't know about you, but when I got to these pages, I was like, oh, I'm already tired. Just looking at them. Not good. The next big problem that I noticed in the graphic novel really had to do with color spread. Okay, not reading the content. I want you to take a moment to just look at this page spread. What do you feel? Like, what's the first thing emotionally that you feel when not reading the text, but just looking at these art spreads? If it's that these are kind of dull, kind of stale, you're probably experiencing the same thing I did, which is we are not actually getting a lot of color differentiation. What is the primary image in this scene? Everything looks kind of stale and all the same color. And it's really hard to figure out where your eyes are supposed to focus in this graphic novel when you have page spreads like this, where the colors are not, I mean, at most we've got some of the blue from the sky, but otherwise we've got just like what ends up looking a little stale. And this makes it really hard to read as a graphic novel because your eyes end up just kind of like going, ooh, over the page because it's just too much tan, to be completely honest. It ends up being really kind of boring to look at. It's a graphic novel. It's supposed to interest me with just the color spread on the sheet. It's not doing that. So that was a big issue. And it's not just in the scenes where we're in the desert and that's very bland. Take a look at this. Again, looking at it from a distance. We do have a lot of color going on, but do you see anything that's like drastically drawing your attention? What's probably like really honing in are the eyes. Like the first thing that you would like, whom is the eyes, because humans are just attuned in a survival mindset to look at where other people are looking. So we actually, as a species, really care where other people are looking because it's an indicator for safety. If somebody like suddenly shifts their eye focus, that could be that they're now looking at something dangerous because we look at things that could potentially kill us. So we are drawn towards eyes. So you're probably looking directly here across this entire page spread that is more color and yet somehow it's still just like not drawing attention anywhere except for these eyes. And yet, is this the most important scene in this spread? No. Arguably, one of the most important scenes is up here, but can you tell just by looking at the page spread that this is what's important? No. No. Here's a really good example of this being a problem. This might look like a spoiler, what I'm about to show you, but again, I'm not telling you context. You're not going to know if you haven't read it. So this really shouldn't come across as a spoiler. I want you to look at it as the art. Okay, in this page spread, where are your eyes immediately going? Probably over here. Not just because this is a full page of art, but because each of the characters are telling you with their eyes and their faces where to look. So they're drawing your attention. over here, right? What's really critical is that this happens kind of out of nowhere. So when I came to the spread, I was like, whoa, and I followed the line. I followed the faces to end up here, but I had no idea why we were over here. I didn't know why this scene was happening. I was like, ugh. Just like, again, broadly looking from the back. Do you know where the most dangerous part of this is? The most serious part of this entire experience right on this page spread is? You probably think it's over here. It's not. It's over here. It's over here. This is the most important thing that's actually happening here. It's right here. When I first read this, I bulldozed through following all their eye contact and the words over here, lost, confused, and had to force my eyes back across to try to figure out what in the heck was going on. This wasn't smooth, this was confusing. And not in a way where I felt the confusion of the characters, but in a way where I didn't know what the graphic novel was trying to accomplish. It took longer, and I had to pull my eyes back and be like, what is going on? And that was the experience of this page spread. Not ideal. Again, supposed to be an epic moment, and yet it kind of looks like just a wash of the same colors. Where do you look? What's the big thing? I don't know. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo page. There's no drawn moment in this spread that you should be looking at. There's no aspect of the design that's drawing your attention that's being like a key critical moment. It's just the whole thing. And it ends up being exhausting a little bit visually to look at, especially when it feels like a lot of the pages are like this. Again, same thing. It's a Where's Waldo page. It's not a look at something important page. Let's back up a bit. And let me also show you another way that this comic is kind of missing the mark. Okay, now I'm going to show this a little bit closer. Again, it's not the text that's important, it's the image. But let me give a little bit of context. We're at the very beginning of the book again, so this is not a major spoiler at all. In fact, I wouldn't consider this a spoiler. But these first 4 panels, we are inside our main character's head. We're experiencing unconsciousness with our main character, the coming to consciousness, okay? We as the reader are located inside the main character. The comic is allowing us to be the main character. Cool. Awesome. A great, nice differentiation from where we were before. We were outside of the main character. In this case, we were with a different character. So this was cool. It's like now we're getting really personal and intimate with our main character by being with them, literally in them, as we are in these first 4 panels. But what happens when we come to this one? What happens is our main character is over here, all right? That's where he is. We were inside this character. We were inside his mind for a minute. Now, where has the audience been placed? We've been thrown out of him, and we are now all the way in the back of this tent, behind these people, behind this random guy, and we're way, way, way back. Not only are we now no longer with our main character, we're simply an external observer, we're also the least important external observer in this entire scene, which is really confusing because we don't know who this guy is. We don't know who this random tiny person back here is, but we're as worthy and valuable as this guy. We're all the way in the back. We are separated so much so. The emotional connection that you feel with the main character here is destroyed, in my opinion, by that complete throwing of us, the reader, outside of our main character. Furthermore, we're being introduced to this new character in this scene. We should have been in his eyes. We should have opened eyes with this character, seen his face, been introduced to him. And yet, look at his positioning. His back is to us. We don't get to see his face. We don't get to meet this character as our main character is meeting this character. We are not only thrown out of the body and not only super separate, we're also, it's a jarring experience of like having no idea what's really going on. Who's meeting who? Who's this guy? I don't even get to see his face. Do you kind of see how we go from intimate and personal to suddenly very removed and impersonal? And there's no good reason to do this in the scene, and all it does is make us, the reader, feel separate from our characters. When a graphic novel is actually supposed to make us feel more in tune and connected with the story because we get to experience it in the medium of art. So it's missing the mark again right here. Here's another great example. Okay, we're back desert. It's really bland across the page. If you're like me, the first thing your eyes get drawn to is the different colors. We've got this larger scene up here with some like interesting architecture and then the dark, which is great. Okay, our main character is entering this building. Do you see those little dark lines? Okay, it shows that there's shadows inside this building. And we can even see it in this page, right? Our main character, I don't know if you can see him, he's like coming in to this dark area. But what happens on the next page? Boom! Suddenly the lights are turned on for no reason. We don't get to be in the shadows. Our main character is experiencing this isolation and uncertainty in this moment, and yet light shining. Why? We were just in shadow. Why did you take that away? Why did you take the emotional experience of being in shadow, of being uncertain, of not knowing if anyone's there for you? That's the whole emotional point of this spread, and yet it's completely removed because they overlit this entire page spread. Even though they started off good, they started off showing the shadows and then completely backtracked and turned on the light. It's like fluorescent lights are on, and you're just like, whoa, why? Why? No. That's a miss again on keeping us connected to the emotions, okay? All right, I want to show you, even with our page spreads that have a little bit more color, it's hard to tell where exactly your eye should be drawn while looking at this page spread. Additionally, and I don't want to get too close, but I hope you can kind of see that we have like a substantial amount of detailing that doesn't really add to this being interesting to look at. It actually kind of makes these scenes a little exhausting to look at. And more importantly, also, the eyes of the main characters. I bet you can't see them very well. And you know what? Neither can I. They're really, really small. But the fact of the matter is, this is an issue with the art itself, the art style. But humans, like I said earlier, we really care about where people are looking, and we gain so much about an emotional experience that another person is having through their eyes. Like, this can tell so much if we're angry, if we're surprised, if we're afraid, like this right here. This is where so much emotion comes across. So when you have an art style that is avoiding being super close to the faces and is not showing a ton of that eye expression, you lose emotion, which is so critical to have in a comic, because unlike with a novel where we're kind of told how the person's feeling, either by the way that they describe their own emotions or their visceral bodily experience with the situation, you're told and shown in a novel what a person is experiencing, or you should be at least. In a graphic novel, you rely on the facial expressions. You rely on the scene context. Where's it darker? Where does that show loneliness, fear, uncertainty, danger? Where is the light stuff? Where does that show brightness, truth, power, attention? Like, so much of those visual cues are critical in a graphic novel. But when you have just a wash of colors, way too many details that it becomes overwhelming, and not enough facial expression, you completely lose the emotion. And this ends up being something where you're just bouncing from block of text to block of text because there's so many words. Goodness gracious. And you're missing the value of the art, which is supposed to be doing the heavy work of telling the story. Good graphic novels, you could probably not even read the words and gain the vast majority of the context of the situation just by looking at the art, okay? That's not the case for this graphic novel. What's another important factor about that is that when there are really emotionally heavy scenes, we don't always feel that our character cares about that being a heavy emotional scene. Really bad things happen in White Sand. Really emotionally devastating, traumatizing things happen. And yet the way it's depicted fails to demonstrate that it matters at all to our main characters. And that's a problem, because I need to experience that strong, heavy emotion with them, rather than me sitting back and looking at it and being like, do you even care that just happened? Because that would devastate me if I was in your position. I'm supposed to be right next to you through this, and yet we're missing the mark here. Now, does this happen throughout the entire book? There actually is a transitional change around chapter 12, which is really great, and the art style changes. This is at the very end of the second graphic novel, so we're about 2/3 of the way through the book before they kind of figure out we need to do something different. But let me show you what this looks like. Again, this shouldn't be a spoiler. It's just kind of reflecting, looking at the art. Okay, here is right before that happens, another block page of spread. Okay, here's this woman. All right, now I don't know about you, but that is not drawn in a way that's particularly flattering. All right, she's not drawn in a particularly beautiful way, and yet she's supposed to be stunning. But she looks kind of messy. And the big reason is, like I said, overuse of line work, where they're trying to show shadows and they're trying to show other things. But like, okay, page right before it. Look at this guy's face for a second. Ignore the words. It looks a mess, doesn't it? All those extra lines, that's all stubble, okay? But it ends up making it look like he just had like a big blast of mud thrown in his face. Like, this is not it, okay? Way too much extra lines, and it ends up looking messy. And it's not just for him. It's not on purpose. All the characters are experiencing this like over line work that kind of, again, makes it annoying to look at. It's not really drawing my attention on an emotional basis. And yet you could tell, like, the artists did so much work. And I appreciate how much time, it's so obvious that so much time went into these designs. And yet that's what's also so tragic about it, because it's clear they put so much detail, so much attention, but in doing so, completely lost the point of a comic. And as a result, lost my emotional connection to it, which is really quite unfortunate. So we look at this page, we have our girl, she not looking good. We flip over, art style changes. Okay, now look at her. Okay, she's smooth, beautiful dress. Look at that gorgeous hair. Ready for this? Oh, look at that face. That red lip. Much better. Not the greatest graphic I've ever seen, but okay. We went from, let's just do a quick comparison, okay? We went from this face to this face. Same person. She's beautiful now, ain't she? She's gorgeous. That was a good change. Okay? Not even for our lovely girl. We went from stubble, but kind of crazy, like way too much line work here for that guy. 3 pages later, much better, right? This guy up here, much better, much better. Easier to look at. We're not overwhelmed by the background. It's still not really telling us exactly where we should be looking, but it's better. It's better, okay? Now, also, do you remember earlier when I showed you this scene and I said everybody's faces are telling you where to look and it doesn't make sense? Like, the real key crux of the entire scene is missed because they're telling you to look too quickly to something else. I want you to show you them fixing that for the 3rd graphic novel. Okay, again, not a spoiler scene. It'll look dramatic. It's not a spoiler scene. Okay, all right. Where are your eyes going? Your eyes are going to be following the words, okay? Main character following the words, and we're pushed to the back scene of these individuals. This is a very good flow. This is exactly the flow you need to be looking at the images as you go from this side of the book across. This is perfect. And where are we located as the audience? We are inside of this cavernous space with these characters. Our main character has come to rescue us. We get to experience that with these other characters. We get to be in the strongest emotion within this scene. We get to join them. That's what we need. We need to be there with them in the biggest emotional experience. Then, a couple pages later, perspective shifts. This is our main character. Where are we, the audience, now? We are behind him, but we're very, very close by. We're a very, very, trusted, confidant friend if we're the audience, very, very near our main character, right? And we're looking up at these characters who are talking to us. We get to experience the emotion that our main character is receiving in this scene, which is the strongest emotion in the image. We get to be a part of it. This is much better, and that's why. Do you kind of see where we're getting to be able to have the emotional experiences we want to have? So I would like to preface that the first 2/3 of this book, the art misses the mark. It's really clear that the artist did a substantial amount of effort and work to make good art. And it's very detailed, but as a result, it ends up being kind of like, oh, and your eyes kind of just like fall across the scene. We don't flow with it. There is no direction. It's just like, what am I looking at? And it ends up being a little exhausting to read. It does get better 2/3 of the way in at chapter 12, the end of the 2nd graphic novel, going to the 3rd. That's really nice. But by then, it's so much, it's tiring. It gets a little bit better, which is nice. We still have a problem, even then, with these half pages of information. They change a little bit in the context of them, but it's still a little hard to read through those. We do get a little bit more shadow work, which really helps. The entire beginning of the book basically has no shadows. We've got a little bit more towards the end, which is good. And the reason they explain it this way is that this planet is tidally locked with its sun. So what that means, it's kind of like our moon on Earth. Our moon is tidally locked with Earth, which means that the face of the moon that's facing us is always the face that's facing us, okay? That's why we don't see the other side of the moon. It's always facing us. The same thing goes with this planet. So the day side always faces the sun, and the dark side always faces away, okay? As it spins around its star, the sun in this world. The first 2/3 of this book assume that because we're in dayside, that means there's no darkness. But the fact is that even when you have the sun out, there's going to be darkness. Shadows, going into dark caverns, dark caves, going into buildings is going to create shade, which can create darkness. Going underground does the same thing. And the last third of this book does take advantage of that. And we do end up underground, and we do end up in darkness, and we get to see the uncertainty that comes with that and all the emotional experience of darkening the page, which is really good. But it's completely missed in the first 2/3 of White Sand. And that's really unfortunate. And it's an artistic decision by the artists, and it takes away. It allows them to have extreme detail because everything's light. But as a result, you lose the emotional experience that the readers are supposed to have. The last third of this book does fix it a little bit, but yeah, it misses that mark. So I had a really hard time reading this, and I felt throughout that this would be a much better book. And I was like, I wish that this was in a novel form. I feel like I would be more connected emotionally to the characters and understand that more. We wouldn't have those spreads of encyclopedia-like pages because it would be, shown to us through the content of the story. So ultimately, White Sand really misses the mark, unfortunately. I would ultimately give this, I guess 3 stars. And in reflection, it's still maybe even less. Honestly, maybe 2.5. It's not good. And I hate to say that because I went into this knowing that it's one of the weaker stories in the Cosmere and trying to have as much patience and kindness and softness. I wasn't expecting excellence, but this really, really struggles. Another important thing is Hoyd, in my opinion. Hoyd, as I don't think this is a spoiler because we literally have Hoyd's storybook collection is coming out. So Hoyd's important. Welcome to the Cosmere. Hoyd's important. But I still don't know why, because I haven't read the Stormlight Archive. I haven't read Miss Borneo 2. Like, I'm still new and fresh and early in the Cosmere reading journey, but, you know, Hoyd's important. Cool. In White Sand, Hoyd does show up, but you don't know that as the reader. The thing is that in the other novels that I've read, you're told that there's this guy named Hoyd. And when you're aware that he's important, you stick to it. And you're like, oh, Hoyd's important. Okay, I'm going to watch what he does, even though he doesn't do a ton of stuff. You just know something's happening here that's important. In White Sand, he's never named. So I didn't at first think he was even in White Sand. I was like, where is Hoyd? And the fact is he is, but I had to go look it up from a Reddit user who gave these lovely pages to tell me where he is. Thank you. Otherwise, he speaks one time at the very, very end, which is, you know, but he's singing. Like, there's Hoyd, you know, he's singing. That's it. No one calls him Hoyd. You, as the audience, aren't told that this is Hoyd. So, like, unless you've got the context of the rest of the Cosmere, it's impossible really to know that this character is important and that he's Hoyd. And so you can find him throughout the rest of the comic. He's a character that shows up. But again, because the art is so weak, sorry to say it, and distracting, it's really easy to completely miss him and not pay attention to this character that sometimes shows up multiple times. So I really wish that there had been some scene where he is spoken to, we get the name Hoyd, so we can have a moment of, oh, hi! But I just did not have that while reading White Sand. So anyways, like I said, not particularly strong and was a bit frustrating. Now, with that being said, I did end up reading the excerpt from Arcanum Unbound of White Sand to see what that would look like. They do have the comic. I would like to point out, I think the fact that this is black and white actually is better because there's more color variation as a result. It's still kind of bland. It's still easy to like not know exactly where to look. But instead of looking at it like it's stale bread, at least it's got shadows and things that make it look a little bit better. But honestly, the best part about the White Sand excerpt is the fact that it has the novel excerpt as well. So it gives you a little comic part, and then it shows you what that same scene looked like in written novel form. Loved that. And I really, really enjoyed the novel form. And I was like, I knew it. I was right while reading this. This story belongs in novel form, not in comic form. It really, really should have been a novel. And the excerpt from Arcanum Unbounded that has and shows that novel part, the part that's in a novel written form, really demonstrates that White Sand is excellent as a novel. So I really do hope, honestly, that one day Brandon Sanderson will publish White Sand as a novel instead of this graphic novel, because I would love to read this story as a novel. Following reading White Sand, my plan originally was to go ahead and read Warbreaker, but unfortunately, because White Sand exhausted me a little bit, I need a break from the Cosmere, which is not something I wanted to be saying at this point in time, but I was like, I'm just like a little tired with it. So instead, I'm going to be picking up something I think is going to be really hilarious and interesting to read, because this is also a novel that has a comic representation. It also has an animation representation. I've already seen the animation. Really excited to read the novel form of it. And also, it's gay, and I always get a little bit tired having a bunch of straight people all the time. So my next book is Heaven's Official Blessing. I'm so excited to read this. You have no idea. I'm so thrilled. This is an 8-book series. I do own all 8 books. I have them in the paperback. Yes, the hardcover is available, but I love the covers on the paperback just a little bit more. So I have it in this edition. I'll be reading these, and then if I want to keep them, which is extremely likely, I will hardback them myself. But I'm super, super thrilled to read Heaven's Official Blessing. I already watched the first 2 seasons. I've seen basically everything, I think, with regards to the animation for Heaven's Official Blessing, and I'm just like really getting into and super excited to read this book. This book does have art inside, which is wonderful, but it's still novel form. And so I'm just so thrilled, and it's yearning, and it's beautiful, and I'm just like, I'm really, really thrilled to read this and to read all 8 books. They are also coming out. I know they've already come out with the graphic novels that are the exact same as the animation. I don't have those, but I do have the newer hardcover graphics. I have one of those graphic books with a slightly different art style. So anyways, I'm really excited to read this and kind of do that again comparison for like this story, which I've already received in the animation medium, reading it now in its novel form, and then doing a follow through by reading it in its graphic novel version, and really doing a comparison across all 3 of those and how I feel about it with this story. So Heaven's Official Blessing is next, and I think this will both be a palate cleanser from the Cosmere, but also somehow provide an interesting comparison for White Sand in how different mediums should or should not be used depending upon which story is being offered. So that ought to be really interesting. So stay tuned for a review on Heaven's Official Blessing. This will be coming soon. That's all for White Sand. Keep reading what you love, and I will see you next time.